Hi, boys and girls. Welcome back. Happy Tuesday. Yeah. So today we're going to be reading our anthology, which is Apples to Oregon. And I want to remind us of our essential question. What are some reasons people moved west? So we got to study a little bit about the gold rush. And so that was one of the reasons people moved west. But California wasn't the only state that people moved to. So in this story, we're going to read about how a family moves to Oregon. And the genre is a tall tale, so it's a fictional story, and some parts may be real, but they're exaggerated, which means they make them sound a lot bigger than they actually are, right? And so we're going to read a story about this little girl's family and how they moved to Oregon. So, this story is by Deborah Hopkins, illustrated by I can't see the name on my screen, Nancy Carpenter. Okay, so Apples to Oregon, and here it says, being the slightly true narrative of how a brave pioneer father brought apples, peaches, pears, plums, grapes, and cherries, and children across the plains. So, let's get started. My daddy loved growing apples, and when he got ready to pull up roots and leave Iowa for Oregon, he couldn't bear to leave his apple trees behind. So Daddy built two of the biggest boxes you could ever hope to see. He set them in a sturdy wagon and shoveled in good, wormy dirt. Then he filled every inch with little plants and trees, hundreds of them. Daddy was ready for the most daring adventure in the history of fruit. "Apples, ho!" he cried. Along with apples my daddy took peaches, pears, plums, grapes, and cherries. Oh, and by the way, he took us along too. We all had lots to do on the journey. Each morning I helped Mama bake biscuits while Daddy prepared for another long day on the trail. At night, Mama and I tucked in the little ones. Then Daddy fiddled lullabies under the stars. Why, I can still hear him crooning to the Gravensteins. "Hush, little babies, don't you cry. Mama's gonna bake you in an apple pie. If that apple pie ain't sweet, Daddy's gonna munch you for his own special treat." We rolled along just fine till we came to the Platte River. It was wider than Texas, thicker than Mama's muskrat stew, and muddier than a cowboy's toenails. Just looking at it made my insides shrivel. The riverbank was crowded with folks and prairie schooners trying to get up the nerve to cross. When they saw us and all our little fruit trees fluttering in the breeze, they burst out laughing. "Those leaves will be brown as dirt before you hit the plains," declared one old geezer. "Plains?" scoffed someone else. "That nursery wagon won't make it halfway across the river." So how are people reacting to the family? But Daddy didn't let their talk worry him. He just looked me square in the eye and said, "Delicious, I'm gonna need your help." Right then and there we built a raft for his tiny tree. Then Daddy loaded me and my little sisters and brothers onto the edges. "Now make sure my precious plants don't topple into the water," Daddy warned. But we hadn't gone far when that muddy drink started to pull us down. "The peaches are plummeting," my sister shouted. "The plums are plunging," boomed my brothers. "Don't let my babies go belly up," howled Daddy. I had to think quick. "We're too heavy. If we don't go faster, we'll sink. We gotta take our shoes off and kick." And so we kicked. Of course, we'd all been raised on apples, and everyone knows young'uns raised on apples are strong, mighty strong. Before you could say Johnny Appleseed, we'd kicked ourselves clear to the other shore. But no sooner had we got every last tree loaded back in the wagon than spied a foul-looking bunch of clouds stomping around the sun just fit to be tied. The wind began to throw around everything that wasn't lashed down, our boots, baby Albert's diapers, every pot and pan Mama had, even our own little wagon. Next, hailstones, big as plums, came hurtling out of the sky. "Guard the grapes! Protect the peaches!" Daddy howled. So we all started tearing off our clothes and holding them over Daddy's darlings. Bonnets, petticoats, trousers, hats, even Daddy's drawers. That means his underwear. Whew, at last the storm passed and Daddy's dainties were safe. After all that excitement, it felt good to hit the trail again, but before long we came to an endless sandy desert. Now remember, us young'uns didn't have our wagon or boots. In no time our feet were redder than the poisoned apple the old witch gave Snow White. Delicious, this is our toughest challenge, said Daddy, wiping his brow as I followed him on tippy toes. We got to find a water hole or my babies are done for. Sure enough, by noon the fruit trees began to droop. By 3 their itty-bitty tender leaves were getting crispy. By nightfall Daddy was crying, a handful of dead branches pressed against his heart. I couldn't bear to see my Daddy suffer, so early next morning I took off to look for water. But although I searched and searched, I couldn't even find a splash or a puddle. After a while I got so tuckered out I plopped down under an old sage. So think about everything this girl's having to do. She's really young, and think about how times have changed too, and how she went off looking for water because she was responsible for that. But we wouldn't really do that today, right? Ouch! I yelled, landing on something hard. But when I saw what it was, I whooped for joy. My very own boot. What's more, it still had some water in it from all those melted hailstones. That was our lucky day, let me tell you. We found every one of Mama's pots and pans spread out across the sand. They all had few drops of water in them, too, just enough to get Daddy's trees to the next water hole before they all keeled over. My, that first sip of water sure tasted good, even if I did have to wait my turn behind some Baldwin apples. Oh, and I'm pleased to say our wagon and all the boots turned up, too. All except one. I reckon that nasty wind blew my left boot clear to the other side of the moon, and if it should happen to drop out of the sky on your head one of these days, I'd sure appreciate your sending it along to me. Well, we kept on going past Courthouse Rock and Chimney Rock and Independence Rock and lots of other rocks that didn't have names. We climbed up rocks and down rocks, and at last we reached the Columbia River. Just 100 miles to go, declared Daddy. But time was running out. Our little trees had almost drowned in the river, got pounded by hailstones, and got withered by drought. How much more could they take? And now we were set for a showdown with the most ornery varmint of all, Jack Frost. Oh, I had already spied him sneaking around our campsite, brushing the cottonwoods with his cold white tongue, but I wasn't about to let him get close to my Daddy's apples. So that night I made a big fire and sat by it, waiting for Jack Frost to show himself. Sure enough, as soon as the moon came up, I spotted the old good-for-nothing slinking across the meadow, heading straight for the sweet Junes. I got ready to fight. Jack Frost came at me, turning the ground so cold my toes went numb. But I didn't give up. I grabbed a flaming stick and threw it right at him. Before you could say Peter Piper picked a peck of pretty pippins, that low-down scoundrel was hightailing it out of there, heading straight for Walla Walla, Washington. I'm mighty grateful, Delicious, said Daddy as he scrutinized his sweeties the next morning. Thanks to you, even the sweets stay snug. We were nice and cozy too, added Mamma, checking the children. Sure enough, all Daddy's trees survived, just as if they'd come across the plains in a swanky carriage. We floated them on boats down the mighty Columbia to a pretty place near Portland. Then we planted them in the sweet Oregon dirt at last. Gold was discovered in California not long after, and thousands of people rushed there to seek their fortunes. But not us. We already had our fortune. Those apples, peaches, pears, plums, grapes, and cherries made us richer than any prospector. We were happier too. After all, apples taste a whole lot better than gold. As for my Daddy, he always He was always sweet as a peach, and he and Mama lived happily to a ripe old age. Daddy never forgot my brave deeds on the trail. Why, as soon as he sold his first bushel of apples, he bought me the prettiest pair of boots you ever saw. Delicious, said Daddy. You'll always be the apple of my eye. So, this is a really nice story. And we learn about their journey west, right? And they came across a lot of problems that a lot of people came across. So think about the things they had to face. And there's a lot of cause and effect in this story, right? So remember, um, cause is what happened, and cause is effect is what happened. Cause is why. So think about a lot of the things that happened here and what they did to stop them, right? So for example, if the cause, so what happened was the hailstorm. What was the effect of the hailstorm? What were they able to get from the hailstorm? What did they lose from the hailstorm? Right? So think about cause and effect all across the story, and I'm also going to make an activity like that for skies. So this is it for our anthology for this week, I believe. Yes, that is the last. So we will be practicing cause and effect on skies. Keep an eye out for that. And that's it for today's anthology reading. Bye.